Hello, and welcome to our third and final session this afternoon, called Career Diversification, Creating Your Unique Path. This session was born from a conversation amongst us in the CWBC Creative Committee about wanting to make sure that we were speaking to the realities of those currently studying music and also those already working in the field. Our feeling was, through many of our own personal experiences, that there's not just one path and not one way to be successful and to make it, even though often that's what it feels like when we're younger. So I think especially right now with COVID too, there's a lot of uncertainty about what the music world is going to look up when things open up again, and more broadly the arts world. So we're here to just talk about that and what success is, what making it is. Can you still be a legit musician and work in other fields as well? You can. And about diversifying your career potential within music as well. So just some brief introductions, excuse me. We have Audray Boivin-Laframboise. She's a member of the Canadian Armed Forces and plays as a full-time member for the Central Band based in Ottawa. She's also an active freelance player in Quebec in the National Capital Region, performing with groups such as the Gatineau Symphony Orchestra, the Tuba de Page Tuba Quartet, the Blush Collective, and the soon-to-come Tuba and Euphonium Choir of Quebec. We have Karen Bulmer, whom you've already seen this afternoon, but I'll just speak to briefly. Karen is a lot of things. She is a tuba player, an educator, a writer, and a podcaster. She currently holds the position of instructor of Loeb Brass at Memorial University, and most recently became the Associate Dean of Teaching and Learning there. She's also a movement education and meditation facilitator and a certified yoga instructor, and has studied additionally in biomechanics, anatomy, and movement for trauma. Anita McAllister. I first met Anita as a camper at Scarborough Music Camp. I don't know if she remembers that, but I do. And I also have memories of her in the numerous Hannaford Street Silver Band concerts that I attended, with which she still plays today. She has a varied performing career and has played with ballet and opera orchestras, symphony orchestras, contemporary music ensembles, and musicals. She's also an active teacher, currently on faculty as the acting brass chair at the University of Toronto. She's also taught at the Royal Conservatory in Toronto and the Wilfrid Laurier University. She has taught at the Interprovincial Music Camp, the Mount Allison Summer Music Program, and is currently on faculty at the National Music Camp. And she's also very dedicated to the development of brass education and is the director of the Hannaford Youth Program, conducting the junior community and youth bands. And Jen Stevens, who I've known for many years as a colleague, but mostly I like to think of her as my friend. She wears a lot of hats. She's the principal tuba player for the Kitchener-Waterloo Symphony Orchestra and has been and remains an active freelance player in Ontario and across Canada, performing with groups such as the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, the Canadian Opera Company Orchestra, the National Ballet, the Calgary Phil, the Hamilton Phil, and others. And she's also a founding member of the Toronto Brass Quintet, an accomplished brass arranger and a sought-out session musician. And she has a busy private studio and teaches at the National Music Camp. So I think, Anita, take it away.
Thanks, Luise. As Luise said, this session is about career diversity. So I guess I can tell you a little bit about my journey. My career basically evolved with no real plan. And I know that sounds really scary, but I guess it's turned out to be pretty diverse. And I've had a pretty interesting life because of it, all in music, basically. And my path is unique, but it's worked for me. So I guess the big deal for me was deciding to go into music in the first place. I was the first of my family to go to university. No one had ever gone to university before. And when I suggested that I wanted to go into music, they thought it was such a waste. If you're going to go to university, go in another subject area. But anyways, my dad said, well, I guess it's okay if you want to teach, but He wasn't interested in me being a musician. He said, girls don't play brass. So I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe my dad had some chauvinistic ideas there, but I don't know if he thought I couldn't make it, or maybe it would be just too hard to make a living. Anyways, being a bit of a rebel that I kind of am, I went to U of T. I fortunately got scholarship because I didn't really have any family support. So like many students, you're going to university and you're involved in the program and you're doing what needs to get done. But when it's over, it's like, okay, now what now? And I guess I hadn't really thought ahead. I wasn't one of those who thought, I want an orchestra job. I want to do this. I want to do that. I really just didn't know. I just wanted to play. And so basically, I just embraced what came along. And one thing led to another. And that's where I am today. So basically, I've kind of viewed my life kind of like a pie. I know that sounds kind of simple, but I had to make a living, and one source was not enough. So I also found it more interesting to do a bunch of different things, and sometimes they complemented one another. So a pie has different slices, and the slices can change size. They can come and go. Some can pay money, and they pay money maybe to support the slices that you want to do that don't pay any money. So, but it makes life interesting, and but also kind of scary. You have to be the kind of person who can deal with insecurity, not knowing what's coming next, how much money you're going to make. And sometimes you feel like you're balancing many things, kind of like the guy at the circus twirling the plates and hoping that you're not going to drop any plates, but trying to hang on. So obviously your life can include some professional stuff, some personal stuff. And for me, I always had that slice that involved commuting because of where I live. So I always had days, pretty much every day, a few hours in the car driving. So anyways, when I got out of school, I started mostly to pick up freelance work and do some private teaching. And that led to some more secure contract work. I played in the Kitchener Symphony, played with the National Ballet, did some touring. I played with the Stratford Festival, with the Toronto Symphony, all for fairly big periods of time, but always did other things on the side, just like people in the ballet and the opera don't work every week of the year. So most musicians do other things as well as a main thing. And most musicians teach lessons. So my teaching, it led to other teaching at music camps, adjudicating, doing guest master classes, working for the Royal Conservatory on the trumpet syllabus, and that was always interesting. Even eventually when I had kids, I, would be teaching kids, working with music with my own kids. And I always enjoy teaching. But when you teach private lessons, often the students you're teaching are high school kids, and they're only free out of school hours. So I was teaching evenings and weekends. And when I had my own kids, I thought, I really want to spend more time with my own kids then. So if I'm not playing gigs, how could I teach during the day so I could be around for my own kids more? So then, coincidentally, I got asked to teach at Wilfrid Laurier University, and that led to teaching at U of T. And now, as Luise said, I'm this year the brass area chair, which has been really, really cool. And I've really enjoyed that experience. Also along the way, I played regularly with groups that don't have a full season, like the Esprit Orchestra or the Hannaford Street Silver Band. And Hannaford led to running the youth program. And who would have thought when I started doing that, it would be 16 years later, I'm still doing the Hannaford youth program. But it's been a great thing. And I love working with the kids, all the ages. It's a lot of variety and a big challenge, but very rewarding. And also working with Hannaford led me to start the Hannaford arm of the publishing, the brass music publishing side of Hannaford. And I found that very interesting, and I learned a lot doing that. Also through Hannaford, I had to learn to do a bit of arranging, especially for younger players. When I would need music of specific ability or instrumentation, I had to get creative and arrange things for that purpose. So basically, I've had a pretty decent life earning my living from basically the trumpet. And I feel especially lucky to have had the U of T teaching during COVID when the performance side of things has not been possible during this pandemic. This year, so my pie was a huge slice of U of T teaching. And the other big slice was trying to run the 3 bands at the Hannaford Youth Program online and also teaching some online lessons. But this year, obviously, the slices of pie regarding the playing were not happening as much. So, you know, it's at least interesting, right? So I've, along the way, had a few policies that I kind of had for myself. One was that if I was looking for when I would decide to do something or not, I had to outweigh the pros and the cons. And if the pros outweighed the cons, then it would be worth doing. If I was looking for perfect, I would always be disappointed. So I was trying to embrace challenges and whatever came along and tried to say yes to things because sometimes I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it and how interesting it was. Life's kind of like a game. You don't always have to win to enjoy the game. And sometimes what you do is a very interesting experience and you need to embrace the challenge of it. The one thing that I would say, though, is that for my life, I've always had to make decisions, whether I would do things or not. And family always came first. And I had to make a lot of decisions along the way that were directly affected because of that. Like where I was going to live. I didn't want to take jobs that were far away. I was going to live around the GTA because of my family. I decided not to take auditions for orchestra gigs, for example, because I wanted to live around here. And I wasn't going to move away if I won a gig. I decided not to do graduate work at universities in the States because I didn't want to go away and live there. I wanted to stay around the Toronto area. And every time I took a gig, I had to think first how it affected everyone else in my life before I said yes. And I think it's the same for a lot of women. I had to know if my kids were going to be taken care of, if dinner was going to get made, if I could make it to the long-term care to feed my mom dinner, for instance, who was going to take the dogs out. I know a lot of women feel this way. There's a lot of things that happen in your life that you're responsible for. And if you decide to do something for yourself, you have to make sure that everything else is taken care of. I'm not sure that for men, it's quite the same. Maybe nowadays a little bit better than it used to be, but not quite the same. Anyways, we all don't have a crystal ball how our life's going to turn out. But, you know, if you say yes a lot, it's amazing what can happen. And I've managed to do a lot, even though I had family. And I took a 3-month-old baby on tour with the Kitchener-Waller Symphony because I brought my mom along to help. I didn't have maternity leave, so I played a Stratford season 7 days after my daughter was born because my husband took paternity leave, which was really, really great. And managed to do a master's degree, even though I had babies, and had my son backstage to nurse him while I was at intermission. You know, it's what you got to do. But I've had to live with my choices. And I must say, I've been lucky to feel excited about how I spent my time and my energy. And also, I've been lucky enough to get paid. So I wouldn't have liked working in an office. I like being self-employed, and I like being able to say no. And I really like that things aren't boring. Everything I do is always changing. I'm always meeting awesome people. And I've had experience that have really pushed me out of my comfort zone. So that was my path in town now. Not everyone would be the same as this, but and maybe people like to feel like they have to have more of a plan or be more goal-oriented. But for me, I just kind of took it as it come, and one thing led to another. And I guess I've been very lucky to have a pretty okay experience. So for everyone else, I'm sure it's not the same, but that was my life so far.
Thanks, Anita. I loved hearing your story. I didn't know all those details.
Well, there you go. Here as they are.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to wanting to have a crystal ball, and I think especially recently in COVID, just wanting to know what how everything's going to pan out, and like, you know, what's work going to look like in 5 years, and trying to figure that all out. So, but it's true. I think even for people, I think I'm more like you. I'm not like, you know, I think I go with the flow a little bit more, but I think for people who are like to have a little bit more structured or goal oriented, I think even in that you have to be flexible, because things shift and change that you can't control. And so thank you. I guess I'm going to speak a little bit to my journey up until now, at least. So I grew up in Scarborough and studied. When I started taking trumpet lessons, I was taking lessons with someone who had a varied performance career. You know, one week he would be playing with a symphony orchestra, another week he'd be doing Baroque trumpet, another week he'd be playing in a musical, and that seemed really cool. I was like, that seems like a great way to make a living as a trumpet player. I did my undergrad then at the Glen Gould School in Toronto, and I loved that. I wouldn't trade a moment of that for anything. But I will say that there was a rather narrow scope of what a career in music as a trumpet player looked like. And, you know, that was an orchestra job. And so I guess I quickly like took that on as the way I was going to move forward, and the goals that I had for my career. When I graduated, I freelanced in Toronto for a couple of years, and then I moved to Boston to study at the Boston Conservatory of Music for some grad work. And there I also studied with symphony players and former symphony players, so it was a similar sort of definition of what a career in music looked like. When I came back to Toronto and started freelancing, I had to kind of go through a process of redefining what success looked like, I guess. I similar to what Anita was saying, I liked living in Toronto, and I didn't necessarily want to audition for jobs that were going to take me very far away from Toronto. So that sort of limited things. And I liked the community I had, and so I had to sort of and the work that I was doing was like I was enjoying it, and I liked working with the people that I worked with, and I was getting called back, and people seemed to like working with me enough. So, you know, by all definitions, that's, you know, sounds pretty good. But I definitely had to sort of do some soul searching to, you know, there were the voices that were sort of like, you know, this is not good enough, or you're not good enough, or there were these bigger expectations that I had to realize weren't actually my own, that I had adopted somebody else's views of what my career and life should look like. And so, you know, I can't say that I've completely eliminated all of negative voices in my head, but I think I stand a little bit more firmly and proudly in what I do and what I've accomplished up until this point. And, you know, we'll see what happens moving forward, but until, you know, there's a little more ease in that. Along the way, I have had some jobs that have been unrelated to music, and I think that's an important subject to talk about, because it can sometimes feel like a bit of a taboo to mention, as if like real artists don't have jobs, or like other jobs, like you live and you work for your art, whatever that might be, and either you as an artist, you shouldn't want, or you don't need another job if you're going to be successful. And that's not true. A good friend of mine, Chris Enns, he's a opera singing financial planner for artists. wrote a blog post a few years ago on this very subject, and he polled a large group of, or a significant a group of from his network of singers and other artists of who in that group had another job, and from the responses he got, like most people had another job. Some of it was within music, like a non-performance kind of music job, but a lot of them also had work that was not music related that supplemented their artistic career. And I guess it feels like the idea of what making it is can be very black and white. And I think it speaks to what Anita was saying before about, if you think about your life as a pie. I love that image. For some people, that might be the whole pie is going to be performance. Although for most, even like symphony orchestra musicians, I know they teach. So there's at least two pieces, of parts of that pie that are different. But for many of us, those pieces of the pie are going to be varied, and some of them are going to be music related and some of them are not. And I think it's trying to find, I think there's more room for defining our own happiness if we remove that black and white definition of making it and what success is, and learning to be a little bit more flexible and open to that idea. So yeah, I think that's where, these are challenging times, and we don't know where things are going to end. I feel like I've said that a few times now, but I guess I'm feeling that where we're going to be at the end of all of this when things open up again. But I guess some trial and error and just finding the right fit, and being open to whatever potential and possibilities come your way. And I'm going to leave it there and pass it off to, I can't remember.
I think it's me.
Jen, yay.
Yeah, so I come at this from a slightly different perspective, mainly due to geography. I think I grew up in the Northwest Territories and moved around a lot. I moved to Newfoundland for my undergraduate. I moved to Ohio for my master's degree, and then just my husband is also a musician, so we picked a point on the map in Canada and said let's go there and give it a shot. So in terms of feeling that I wanted to be in one place, that was never really a consideration for me, and luckily, I've had the support of a partner who's always been like, yeah, we can live wherever. So I have taken those auditions all over the place, which has been great. However, I at this point find myself just really loving living in the city and being here. But I think. To the point of welcoming in these different facets of your career, I've freelanced for a long time, and so I've just very recently landed a position with an orchestra about a year ago. So I'm still really coming at this from the standpoint of freelancing and all those pieces of the pie, and through that, I think I've discovered some parts that maybe were missing for me in terms of being a performer. So I certainly love performing. I love what Anita said about just weighing the pros and cons and saying yes whenever you can. I've always had this mentality of no matter what people ask, if I can do it, I just say yes. That's always been the way I've operated. And then I started to think, well, if that's the way I'm going to operate, can I expand those boundaries? Can I say yes to things that aren't just gigs, right? So I started kind of asking myself, what other things am I interested in? Now, when I first moved to town and I was very new on the scene, I got a job as a florist, which I very quickly discovered I adored. I absolutely loved it. And so I continued working as a florist part-time for a really, really long time. And it's only in the last few years that I haven't done it. And I kind of wish I still did. I really, really, it fed a part of my personality that wasn't getting, I guess, nourished by the, my life in music. And so, kind of with that in mind, I've tried to keep my eyes open for other opportunities that might be of interest and value to me. And so I think that we can really ask ourselves whether we have to be so rigid. Why do we have to be so rigid and say, I'm going to, working in an orchestra is the way to do this career? And I don't think there really is one way to do this career. And if I think about the people that I really admire, there are so many facets to their life. They have such rich lives. And certainly when I think about my life, that's what I want. I want to have a rich life. So I think we can ask ourselves a number of questions, right? What do I like to do? Are there things inside music that I'm gravitating toward, that I'm thinking about, and I'm kind of, putting on the brakes because I've been told that that's not the way to do this? Are there things outside of music that, again, I'm interested in trying, but I'm putting on the brakes for the same reason? So for me, that's been, I became a couple years ago an assistant orchestra librarian, which is certainly not, it's not a place I saw myself going, but I saw a job posting come up, and I thought immediately I was excited about it. And so I decided to run with that feeling. And I think it's been, for me, that's been really, really interesting. I think it makes me a more knowledgeable performer. I think that it informs my playing, and it's something that I really, really love. To the same point, I've delved a lot into arranging. That's something that I've discovered I really loved. And that, again, like Anita was saying, came out of a need. Like, people needed things. When I went through university, I was expected to arrange. I was really, really fortunate as an undergraduate to study with a bass trombonist who also was a very prolific and wonderful arranger, and he taught me a lot of great skills. So I came out of my undergraduate having this desire to arrange, and then my master's, I studied with Velvet Brown, and it was an expectation that we would do an arrangement for every ensemble we were in every semester. And I really was able to hone those skills, and it was really interesting. And it's something I've continued to do, and I hope to be able to get better and better at it. It's something I find really, really exciting. I think for everybody, those things are going to be different, right? So for some of us, it's orchestra librarianship and arranging, and for some people it's contracting, and for some people it's personnel managing. But if we think about the community that we're a part of, all these things are just going to make us more valuable parts of our community, whether they're in or outside of music. And I think that we need to strike that balance for ourselves so that we're living a life that is fulfilling to us. And that doesn't mean that it needs to measure up to somebody else's expectations, or the expectations that, unfortunately, I think we're taught in school are the only way to be successful in this career. So I think it takes a bit of a leap to decide to invest in yourself that way, because we feel like we're taking time away. Like, I'm taking time away from the practice room, or, I'm taking time away from this specific skill set that I've been told is what I'm supposed to be doing with my time. But I think if we can start to view it as an investment in ourselves, we invest the time in ourselves. Sometimes we have to invest resources in ourselves. Do I need to go and take some courses, or do I need to buy supplies? Do I need to, whatever it is that we need? For me as a librarian, it was buying some very expensive books and they're great. I get really excited about these very expensive books where I can look up information, and that feeds a part of my nerdy brain that just makes me really happy. So, giving yourself permission to invest in yourself I think is a really, really big thing that we need to do to be able to create all those pieces of the pie, as Anita said, to create our whole selves as musicians and artists and just people. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective. I'm gonna pass it over to Audray, but before I do, I'd like to just mention, if anybody's watching, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat on Facebook or YouTube, and we'd be happy to bring them into this discussion.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to be part of this. I really feel honored to share my career experience with you all. My experience with my studies were pretty as is, conservatory, and then university, and the bachelor to master. Then I started my freelance career, well, while I was in school, but also I did a few years of freelance career. And I met so many people, members of the CAF, and that were telling me that it was a really good job to have, and they showed me all the opportunities that the CAF were offering. And on the other side, I also had other friends and colleagues that were telling me not to go in the CAF for other reasons. Like a lot of musicians think that it's not the ideal job too, that it will take away from your time in the music because of all the admin jobs that is on the side. And if I can relate to what Jen just said, a lot of musicians do have another job on the side. So in the CAF, as a musician, you do have another job on the side too. So it balances everything. So yeah, I was stuck in between that big decision between not knowing what I really wanted for my career. So then I joined in 2014 because I wanted something more. I wanted like the freelance career. I loved it, being organized, scheduling my time, teaching, orchestra. I did so many gigs in small ensembles, but I wanted something a little bit more steady, a little bit more steady. I think to go like back home at night to be with my family. It's a tough job to be freelance and having all sort of jobs here and there. And so I joined the reserve at first in 2014. I was 27 years old at the time, so a little bit later than the kids when they start in the military. And so reserve band for me was like added to my freelance. It was a gig for me, part-time job, so one night a week and gigs on weekends, more, and sometimes during the week too. So it was kind of added to my freelance career. And then I started to do contracts with the music of the Royal 22e Regiment. And that hit me. Like, that was it for me. I was blown away by such talented musicians, their creativity, and also the organization of the military around that. It's a really fabulous thing of like a family, really. You work with the musicians every day. You do everything together, and that's also like it. You can really hear it in the music also. So I did a few contracts like that, and I auditioned for the Reg Force, and my first posting was here in Ottawa. I'm really happy. I came back to my family where I'm from, so I'm really, really happy with my first posting. I would go also anywhere. There are 6 bands in Canada. So from the west coast, you have Victoria, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Ottawa, Quebec, and Halifax. So I'm also really blessed to have a partner that will go anywhere too. I think surrounding ourselves with a person that understand and that are willing to go like anywhere with you is a really good thing also for your career choices. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about is creating your path. Your career path is hard often because we're all struggling with fears with like we're in school, we're gonna face fears of new styles, fears of like being intimidated by other musicians also. So or like doubling or like playing new instrument in a new key for that type of gig or that type of gig. So it stops us to go further. And so what I want to say about that is just say yes. Just allow yourself to say yes to try this audition or try new things that you at first you don't think you're gonna love it, but after that, like it pushes you to be prepared for any opportunity that comes up to you, to be prepared for a gig or for an audition. And saying yes was for me the best thing I did for my career. So I had a code. I had three questions that I was asking myself anytime a gig was coming up or an audition or a career choice. I had, so I do it to learn something. Will I learn something from this? Will I have fun, simply fun, like a new style? I'm going to do a Dixie gig or something like that. Or will I get money? Those were the 3 things. And money sounds a little bit, not selfish, but like centered on yourself. But it is important. You need to eat. You need to pay your rent. So money was the other thing too. So if I could say yes to one of those 3 things, I would take the gig. I would push myself to do that. And you'll realize that more often than ever, you're gonna say yes to one of those questions. Probably if you say yes to all 3, well, that's like the dream job, right? And for the military was actually that for me too. So I'm still learning so much. My skill set has like doubled in finance, production skills. It's on that side, it's really incredible, and I have fun. Honestly, the colleagues are nice everywhere you go. You meet also like so many musicians around, so I always have fun doing parade or like parade band, or just band concerts. And of course there's the money too, which for me was kind of important to be settled. They give you nice instrument to play on over your career, that you can choose, material, everything, that they're really there to support you and support your career. So that's how I see it. And yeah, but what I really enjoy the most in my military career is the family that's created, like here in Central Band too, like the relationships you make with playing with musicians day after day is really what I enjoy the most. So that's my career path.
It's just so inspiring hearing everybody talk about your careers. It's really fascinating. So if anyone's new to this session, if you've been at the other sessions, you'll know that my video keeps freezing. We're just going to go with it. So I'll just describe a little bit about my career trajectory and some things that I've sort of reflected on and learned along the way. So when I did my school sort of boom, 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 I did my master's degree, or my bachelor's degree, doctorate, all kind of back to back. And I studied in the States for grad school, and then I came back to Canada, and that was sort of an interesting experience. One of the things I noticed about doing grad school in the States is I didn't feel like I had a huge community. I really felt like I had to sort of start from scratch. So that was sort of an interesting challenge. So I lived, I think it was about five or 6 years that I lived in Ontario after grad school. And over those years, I sort of built up a career doing a lot of private teaching. I was freelancing. I played in a brass quintet that was quite active. And I taught tuba and euphonium at Western. So I just taught the studio there. And I also taught at the University of Windsor for a few years. And I'd like to just acknowledge something that's been really key in my career has been timing. So I was really, really, when I finished school, I'd been back in Canada for, I don't know, a few months, maybe a year. And the tuba instructor at Western retired. I had gone to Western. He'd been my teacher. We'd been in touch all those years. And he recommended me for the position, and I got the position. And so this was just really, really excellent timing for me. And this has been key in a number of points. So over a number of years, I'd sort of built this career up where I was feeling like things were moving in the right direction, like I was getting more work, and I really, really liked my job at Western. But it was also pretty clear that it wasn't sustainable financially. So it was really clear that I was single at the time, that I wasn't going to be able to sustain it over the long term. I also think emotionally I would have had a difficult time sustaining it. Freelancing can be really, it can be really exciting because you're always in new situations and you're always learning new music. You meet all kinds of people. You get to travel to different places. All that was really wonderful. I also found it really stressful because there's always this thing of like, sometimes you get hired and that's really exciting, but then sometimes you don't get hired. And then, some people seem to be able to kind of ride those ups and downs with like relative equanimity. And I am not one of those people. I found it really, just really stressful. And I always wondered like, what should I be doing differently? And so I'm not sure emotionally it would have been sustainable. So another point of good timing, Ken Knowles, who was Jen Stevens' instructor at Memorial University, the fantastic bass trombone player she mentioned, he retired. And so I applied for the job here at Memorial University. And I'd kind of been thinking of an academic career all along. I don't really like to be up late. I like to go to bed really early and get up really early. So the idea of an orchestral career was never super appealing for me because I don't like leaving the house at night. So I really love to teach. Like my when I went to school, I'd gone to school because I wanted to be a music teacher. And when I switched to performance, I still had teaching as a goal. So I got this job at Memorial, which has been really, really wonderful. I teach all the low brass students, so tuba, euphonium, and trombone. And then I've taught a whole bunch of different courses over the years. So lots and lots of different things. And so I sort of felt like I hit the jackpot, like this was my dream job. And it felt like that for a number of years. One thing that was very challenging for me was to continue to balance playing, because when you're in a full-time academic job, it really is full-time. You're teaching a lot. There's an expectation for what they call research or creative activities. So in disciplines outside of music, that would be like publishing papers and doing experiments. And in music, it would be things like playing concerts. And because it's a really small community and we don't have, there's not really like a freelance scene here, that would mean playing solo recitals. Like, so for me to keep that part of my, keep playing, be active, like we don't actually have the personnel here for a professional brass quintet. So it was really sort of like a make your own fun sort of playing situation. So I really embraced that for a number of years. And then I had my son, he just turned 10. it became much harder to balance working full-time, teaching full-time. Oh, there's also a lot of administration with academia. That's sort of the other component of the job, lots of committees. And so, and then there, you know, I was starting to get a little bit sort of restless. So, you know, one of the things I loved about freelancing was that it felt like there were more pieces in my income pie. So if I didn't want to do something, like I would only have to replace like a little bit of that income. And when you have a full-time job, there's like security and all, it's, you know, all that's really amazing. And you've just got this one pie with no pieces. So figuring out how to kind of like diversify within that framework has been a really interesting challenge for me. So at a certain point, I became really interested in musicians' health and mindfulness and how to apply sort of mindfulness concepts and movement concepts to musicians. And I really focused on that for a few years. My playing was sort of, I wasn't as focused on playing, but I would still try to do a recital every year or two. And then, you know, so something that was, so I'll fast forward a little bit and then I'll go back. So about a year ago, I took on a new role. We created a new position at the School of Music here, which was the Associate Dean for Teaching and Learning. I'd never had any interest in academic administration. Like a year ago, a little over a year ago, if you'd said, how much would we have to pay you to be an administrator? I would have said, there's no amount that you could pay me to do that. And then in a faculty meeting about a year ago, our dean, you know, announced that he was creating this position. And like, just, it's sort of like Jen said about the library position, I sort of got this like yes feeling and pursued it. And I don't think I've ever been happier in my career than since I've started this administration role. And so that was great. I was loving being associate dean. This is what I'm going to do now for the next like number of years. And then the dean called me up and said, listen, I've accepted a 2-year position at a vice president level. Would you consider being the acting dean for 2 years? And I was like, well, that's not really part of the plan. But I was so enjoying the administrative stuff. And so I said, sure. And that will start now in about a month. For 2 years, I'll be acting dean. And so I've sort of ended up in a place that I wouldn't have anticipated, but it's been really enjoyable. And one of the things I've been reflecting on over the past number of months, but also hearing all the different speakers today, is it can be really interesting to pay attention to where you're investing your time and your passion. So, you know, I really resonate with what Luise was saying about like sort of internalizing what the institutions that you were in kind of told you, or what sort of our broader musical culture told you should be working towards. Because I definitely think that was the case for me, that I'd sort of adopted this idea of like, this is what a successful musician looks like, or a successful career. And then I kind of like tried to mold myself into that, you know, as a freelancer. And then then I became an academic, and then I tried to sort of mold myself into what that might look like in that context. And so what's really interesting is Jen, in the previous session, if any of you were there, Jen was talking about, you know, some of these ways she practices. So like picking a season from a symphony orchestra and just like preparing that season, so you'll know how it feels like, or playing an etude book all the way through the end, like all these amazing things, ways of practicing. That, and I was like, wow, like I would never do that. Or like listening to music out on a walk. I'm like, no, I'm going to be listening to a podcast. And so it's, you know, what was interesting is like over the past number of years, I've been really passionate about teaching and curriculum development, and really concerned about the way we educate musicians. I'm concerned that we're not educating them for the world that they're entering. I'm concerned about this phenomenon that our programs don't show the diversity of what careers in music look like. And so students do come with this sort of like, well, I guess I'll do this or this, and like, hopefully it'll work out. So those things have been preoccupying me. I really am interested in like organizational psychology and behavioral psychology. So I always am listening to these podcasts about like, you know, workplace dynamics and like, you know, all these sorts of things. And so, it's interesting that like now I'm suddenly in an administrative role, and it's like, oh, all this really makes sense. Like this is on some level, I feel like I've been working towards this, and I think that can be just interesting to reflect on. I kind of wish that I had when I was younger. I'm thrilled with my life and my career. I'm really happy with how things are. I love where I live, so I don't really have regrets. But I do sometimes wonder, like, had I been a little bit more confident about really tuning in to what some of those interests were that were maybe suggesting something other than a traditional performance path, and really acting on those, I'd be curious to see where I might have ended up in a completely different place. And again, I'm thrilled with where I ended up, and I feel very thankful that the career I have has offered so many opportunities to reinvent myself within the job. I haven't had to change jobs really. I've been able to kind of reinvent myself, which has been really wonderful. But yeah, I don't think that I have much more to say other than that, but except for that it's really wonderful and inspiring to hear everybody's journeys.
Thank you to all of you. A few things sort of pop out for me from everything that's been said here, sort of themes, I guess. Going back to what you were just saying, Karen, about sort of following or investigating some of those other creative outlets. I think, whether we want to put it on music schools or like the way the like music education is structured, or also just sort of the nature of what it means to be a musician and practicing in sort of that single focused like thinking that we can get into, or that is sometimes required. I think it's really, but I think there are other creative parts of ourselves that need to be fed, and sometimes those then end up like opening up other possibilities. I've found that for myself too, and others were speaking about that too, and also just staying open to opportunity, and flexible in what comes your way. I feel like I heard everybody speaking about that. And finally, I think what struck me too is that I don't think there's an arrival. I think, right, like I think we perhaps think that one day we'll arrive at some place and we'll have made it or something. But I think we're all sort of demonstrating that like there doesn't really exist. We keep evolving. That sort of goes back to staying open to opportunity and possibility of what might come our way, and we evolve, and what we want changes as our life circumstance changes. And so I think that's sort of that jumped out at me. I don't know if anyone else has a comment on any of that.
Well, I was just thinking that we as musicians, it's a creative thing that we do, and in order to just keep that creativity alive in us, what I found beneficial is doing other things that I find creative in my life, whether it's that aren't necessarily music, but whether it's baking and making cool cupcakes, or gardening, and or stuff like that. That still can be artistic, but it's not music. You know what I mean? And having kids is a great outlet for doing creative things with kids, but it keeps that energy alive. You know what I mean? And then when you go to your music, you seem to have that spark that you can bring to your art in another way, right? So sometimes that diversity is very, very helpful for keeping us awake and energetic, I suppose. And the other thing I was going to just say, in the music business, nothing really replaces the in-person nature of it, because I found, as Karen said, sometimes it's timing, what things happen to you, but sometimes it's just conversations or interactions with people on the way. Let's just face it, this is a people business. And whether you're in school, you're interacting with other students or teachers, whether you're in a performance group, you're working together as a team, working with your colleagues and collaborating, but also hanging out on breaks or, waiting around between the rehearsal and the gig or whatever. And sometimes conversations just happen and one thing leads to another, and something happens as a result of that. So what's been really hard with this pandemic, I find, is that lack of in-person contact, because email just doesn't do it for you. And Zoom is we're really lucky we have it, but it's that whole in-person thing that seems to make music and creative things evolve in a way. And sometimes your career happens as a result of that kind of interaction, I don't know what you guys think, but it's been a big deal for me. And that's why you don't want to leave a bad footprint behind you, because people remember, and you never know whose path you're going to cross down the road. So, putting your best foot forward in social circumstances, it's a very important thing.
Yeah. And, I think one thing that came up over and over and over again today is the sense of community. And I think certainly we're all feeling a lack of that right now. But, whenever we are as a community, or, and we build these bonds with one another. The one thing I've noticed, like in terms of finding things that maybe you enjoy doing that you didn't know you enjoyed doing, and different paths that you can take, those things often, as you say, Anita, come out of the community, whether it's, you're playing with people in a brass quintet and somebody says, oh, well, somebody needs to put together the books, who wants to do that? And somebody needs to be the person to liaise between clients for gigs, who wants to do that. People will naturally fall into their roles based on their own personality and their own interests. And that can often be, a jumping off point for, oh, well, I didn't really know that I enjoyed being, a contractor or whatever it is. But that can be, a jumping off point for finding where those places are. And again, that just makes the community stronger. And I think the same goes for whether you're doing something outside of music as well. We all have different areas of expertise that we can rely on one another for, or ask questions to each other about, and it just serves to make the community stronger. And I think that's something that we can't kind of diminish. It's a really important facet of what we do on a broader scope.
So we have about 1 minute left. I don't know if there are any questions or further comments from our panelists or people watching. This has been a fantastic day. Thank you to everyone for joining us. It's been great to have you. Thank you for your time. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in. Thank you for your time and giving us part of your Sunday. Oh, I see a comment on Facebook has just come through, so let's go to that first. Let's see. Patrick says, everyone has spoken about how the career path for musicians is ingrained to become an orchestral musician. But could someone maybe elaborate on when they realized that there were options and how that changed your decision-making in the pursuit of a musical career? Do you want me to put that up so you can see it? Would that be helpful? Can do that. There we go.
Well, I mean, I can speak very briefly to that on my, I know other people have different perspectives. I think that once I stopped being a student and started freelancing, and the people who were my mentors slowly became my colleagues, and I stopped maybe seeing them as other quite so much, and we had more open conversations, I started to realize that, there were so many more facets. But I think that when there's such a division when you're a student, that often you don't realize, you're just going for, the shiny picture that you see, and you don't see all the stuff that comes in the background of those various lives. And again, I think a lot of that is about giving yourself permission to explore the things that you want. And I think that's a challenging thing, to give yourself permission. to do.
The other thing is, it's just the hardcore reality that there aren't that many orchestra jobs. I mean, you know, let's face it. And we're not violinists, and there's only so many trumpets. There's only one tuba in an orchestra. And sometimes you're not playing all the time. So the reality is sometimes you're even if you have an orchestra gig, some groups don't play every week of the year. So you have to, it's not going to be all of the money you need to live on, and you need to explore other possibilities. Sure, it's fun and you enjoy it. And, you know, if you really, really want to do an audition and get a gig, sometimes it happens. Some people do many, many auditions and they don't win the gig. You know what I mean? So it's not a given that just because you want to be an orchestra musician, it's going to happen. Unfortunately, you know?
So I guess every opportunity is an option. Everything that comes on your path is an option. So you don't need like one job to have that option. Freelance is also full of options, like your pie, like you have full of jobs, full of diversity in your career.
Thank you for that question, Patrick. So we're going to wrap it up there. Again, thank you all for joining us. Please stay tuned for details regarding our next event coming up in June. It's going to feature, it's focused on West Coast performers, so performers, musicians, educators from Alberta and BC. They have several topics planned. It might be a 2-day event. We're not sure yet, so that's why we're not giving you specific details, but topics covering education and music in Canada, whole body health, life balance, and brass pedagogy, to name a few. So please stay tuned for details. We will release those as soon as we have them for you. And thank you again for joining us. Stay safe and stay healthy. Take care. Bye.